calls for charges of war crimes against the Russian military, it is worth finding out exactly what constitutes a war crime and how do allegations of war crimes make it to court. Bilkis Willi is a senior researcher in the Conflict and Crisis Division at Human Rights Watch. First, what is the definition of a war crime?
Simply put, a war crime is a serious violation of the laws of war where there is an individual perpetrator who had criminal intent, being complicit, ordering or participating in the crime. Now, serious violations of international humanitarian law include things like disproportionate attacks on civilians, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, or deliberate attacks on civilians.
And from videos circulating showing the discovery of mass graves as well as bodies with their hands tied behind their backs left in the streets in Bucha, let's say in Ukraine, would that constitute a war crime?
When we're trying to make a determination about whether individual incidents might constitute war crimes, and of course, ultimately, it would be a court that would make that ultimate determination. One of the most important things initially to assess is whether there was a military target in the area at the time of the attack, and that will then allow us to know whether the attack we're looking at might be a deliberate attack on civilians versus perhaps an indiscriminate or disproportionate attack. Now, in the context of Bucha, what we're seeing from social media content, what we're hearing from journalists who are there, is that they're finding bodies, including bodies of people in civilian dress, with hands tied behind their backs, with signs that they were shot in the head or in the back. Now, in cases like that, we have real concerns. First and foremost, if there is no trying to suggest that these individuals were military, and if this was an execution of civilians, this would, of course, constitute a war crime if carried out by the Russian forces. But even if these were Ukrainian armed forces, under the laws of war, once an armed force from the other armed party is captured, they are given the protections of prisoners of war, and they cannot be extrajudicially killed on the sides of the battlefield. So there, too, executions of Ukrainian armed forces by Russians, once they're captured, would represent war crimes.
How does an investigation become a trial?
The first thing that one needs is essentially a judicial entity that is willing to pursue these cases. Now, unfortunately, in so many wars, there hasn't been any judicial body that has been willing to or able to accept evidence to examine what may constitute war crimes, crimes against humanity, other serious laws of war violations. The situation in Ukraine is distinctly different. You have the International Criminal Court, which opened, in the first days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, investigations into potential violations of the laws of war in the context of Ukraine. But then you have actually multiple other prosecutorial units across different European countries that have opened potential war crimes investigations. So this is a rare occasion which there are judicial entities that could indeed be documenting these incidents and pursuing charges.
So let's look at the evidence that would be needed to pursue war crimes cases. Would you need witnesses? Would you need first-hand testimony? Would you need video? And how would you actually verify the truth of, the information that you get?
So as investigators, we'd like to get to the scene to see what it looks like, what evidence is available, to try and get a picture and an understanding of what happened. But of course, we're coming to the scene after the fact. And so it's so essential when doing these investigations to actually be talking to witnesses. Now, ideally, we speak to multiple witnesses unrelated to each other who are providing us with testimony that matches what we're seeing at the scene and testimony that matches what we're hearing from other witnesses. Now, in this day and age, of course, there are other forms of evidence that come forward, things like photos and videos, some posted online on social media. There's also photos and videos that individual witnesses that we speak to have taken and share with us. And of course, that content can be very helpful in terms of providing more information, new angles, but it also is key to substantiating what witnesses are telling us happened at the time.
Bilkis Willi is a senior researcher